Okay, folks, welcome to my first review of Bloodruth #1, covering its supernaturally subpar setup. This is going to take place during the first 25 pages in the book, which are all prelude to the main conflict that takes place, or at least the start of a main conflict that takes place. I have not read through the entire book. I'm going along with my usual, I will read until I have enough to complain about it. Oh my God, do I already have enough to complain about at this point? Now, I have to warn you, if there are any children around, if you're in the workplace, you might want to save this video for another time. I am going to be dropping some F-bombs in here because the more I have covered these 25 pages, the more upset I get. And this is probably my second or third read through that I'm coming off of, and yeah, it's all coming to a head here. Okay, so who are the writers of this mess? It is the Soska sisters. They're previously responsible for the garbage that was Yaira #1. I think I gave that either a 4 or a 4.5 out of a possible 10. Suffice it to say, I was not impressed. In fact, I'm not even really sure they actually wrote the Black Widow story that they are credited with, because I cannot believe that people who are this bad at writing comic books and comic book dialogue could have possibly accomplished Black Widow No Restraints play. So I'm still going on the basis that they turned in a treatment. That treatment got turned into something more competently written by somebody else, and I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong about that. Heaven knows I've been wrong about things before, but I cannot see how these two can crank out the kind of material they have been cranking out in Yaira #1 and now Bloodruth #1 and actually have written Black Widow No Restraints play, which was actually a pretty decent book. So, now that I've thoroughly crapped all over them, let's move on to the artist. We've got Michael Montanot, and this guy is pretty good at drawing pictures. As far as comic book sequential art, you will see some things that I have some trouble with, but honestly, if this guy were to land a book in the big two, I would probably pay attention to it. He's got some chops, and he was the winner of the ISOM #2 art contest that was held by Rippaverse, I want to say. And if that is the case, then I believe I actually picked out his drawing of Norfolka as my own #2 pick. I think the only reason I didn't pick it as #1 is because it was of Norfolka and not ISOM #2 or anything related to that. So he's got talent, and I am actually impressed with the level of artwork that he brings to the book, except I do have problems with some of his constant artistic choices, usually having to do with inset panels and sometimes some continuity from here to there. Sometimes it's a little bit of posturing on the part of the characters. Anyway, you'll see as I go through the book. Now, one thing, Michael, if you are watching this, just be aware that you did misspell your own name on your website. It is Montanot, not Montanant. So you might want to go and fix that. Now, the title blurb is where I normally start, and let's take a look at the title blurb for Bloodruth #1. The mysterious mystic, Sydnee Bloodruth, was born into the family business of hunting Hellians. Her mission brought her to join forces with ISOM to face the infernal devlings when they set fire to Silman Ranch and rescue Sanford Williard. But what is it that... Oh, God almighty, this is a dog's breakfast of a title blurb. Let's get started cleaning this thing up. First thing we need to do is get rid of the commas around Sydnee Bloodruth because we don't need those. The next thing that we're going to need to do is deal with this humongous sentence that just runs on and on and on. Let's just start by breaking off the last piece of that, and we will deal with the first portion of the sentence as a separate thing. So, where are we going from here? Well, first, I'm going to say that we don't want to duplicate the word brought twice in the same title blurb, so why don't we change the first brought to compelled, so that it begins, her mission compelled her to join forces with ISOM to do what? To face the infernal devlings when they set fire to Silman Ranch and rescue Sanford Williams. Okay, that's splitting up subjects and verbs, and you don't want to do that. Let's rearrange things here. Her mission compelled her to join forces with ISOM to rescue Sanford Williard from the infernal devlings who set fire to Silman Ranch. Next sentence. But what is it that brought this blood witch to Florispark, and what evils await her in town? A few things I don't like about this, and part of it is having read ahead and know that this book is set in the past. So I think it should be made more clear that the question that we're going to be answering is what originally brought the blood witch to Florispark. I say the instead of this because at this point we don't actually know that there are any other blood witches besides Bloodruth herself. So let's not give the game away if that turns out to be a point in the story later. But what originally brought the Blood Witch to Florispark, and what evils await her in town? Well, first we need a comma, and then do we really need evils to be plural? I don't think so. Last but not least, in town. Florispark has been called a city-state, so let's not reduce it to a town. Let's just say there. And then the last portion where it says something wicked this way comes, let's get the hell rid of that because it's cliche as fuck. All right, so now we've got our solid title blurb. The mysterious mystic Sydnee Bloodruth was born into the family business of hunting Hellians. Her mission compelled her to join forces with ISOM to rescue Samford Williard, I hate these freaking Rippaverse names, Samford Williard from the infernal devilings who set fire to Silman Ranch. But what originally brought the Blood Witch to Florispark, and what evil awaited her there? Okay, so now we open on a scene that is so obviously the story of Cain and Abel, and I have to admit I'm kind of disappointed at that from the jump. And the reason being is that Cain and Abel is a motif that has been done to death in the comic book world. I mean, you've got the Cain and Abel, who are their House of Mystery and House of Secrets caretakers, respectively. You've got the Luther Strode trilogy, which featured Cain as the big bad of the trilogy. You've got DC Comics again, with Vandal Savage taking on the role of Cain. And then you've also got Cain being featured in the New 52 DC Comics as the first vampire in the I Vampire series. So this whole Cain and Abel thing has been done to death, and unless you are going to bring something really new and fresh to it, there's no sense in trying to retread old ground as if you were bringing something really cool to the table. And the only thing that's really being brought to the table here is some serious misinterpretation, because if you look at this scene, you've got Cain and Abel, from left to right here, and they're both apparently engaged in the process of slaughtering this lamb. Abel bathes his hands in the blood of the lamb, and then a light shines down on him, but not on Cain, who I'm guessing was doing the same thing. I mean, you don't see Cain protesting the slaughter. He's just kind of there. It's like, let's just see what happens, and I don't know what they're trying to say with this kind of interpretation of the Cain and Abel story. It doesn't get any clearer from the narration that goes on, where it says, God asked his people, if you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, know that sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. Now, first of all, I want to point out the fact that it says God asked his people, but really, God asked Cain that in the story of Genesis, so I don't know what his people represents. The other thing I want to point out is that the scene on the right is just way too damn Brokeback Mountain for me. I mean, oh my god, I just don't know how to quit you. Oh, so you've got this kind of Cain representing humanity as a whole, or maybe representing God's people as a whole? That leads into the next portions where the Soska sisters inexplicably start saying they in reference to Cain. I mean, I don't know what they're going for here. I mean, are they trying to say that non-binary androgyny is supposed to be a sign of the mark of Cain or something? I mean, I could go with that if Cain looked anything like androgynous, but I don't know what the hell they're trying to make a point of. And if you want to see a more accurate interpretation of the Cain and Abel story, please do go to my own playlist on religion called Don't Take This as Gospel and look up episodes 51, 52, and 53. So getting back to the Soska's Cain and Abel story, the story kind of ends like you'd expect. God put a mark on the damned that let others know that they are not to be killed. Anyone who would harm the damned would suffer vengeance 7 times over. The damned were hidden from God's presence and forced to live out their lives carrying the punishment of their cursed bloodline. The sin pumped through the veins of one descended to the next, all bore the same mark. I get it now. Hey, I get it now. This is how Bloodruth gets her powers, right? Because Bloodruth apparently is like a descendant among these damned. That's gotta be it, right? Well, no. I know that my family carries a cursed bloodline. We were made to face the damned. Our blood makes us special. Okay, now I'm confused, because I thought for sure that Bloodruth was one of the damned. And now we're saying that that's not the case? So she has a cursed bloodline, but she's not damned. She's one of the ones that faces the damned. So does that mean that, okay, obviously she's fighting vampires of some kind. Does that mean that those are the damned? But wait, these are Hellions. Okay, Hellians, we already have a kind of origin story for that was given to us back in ISOM number 2. In ISOM number 2, page 76, we get this info dump from Bloodruth, basically saying that Hellians come from a pocket dimension that looks like hell, and that's why they're called Hellians. So now we've got three things going here. We've got Bloodruth with her cursed bloodline, we've got the damned, whoever the hell those are, and now we've got Hellians who are from another dimension, and I don't even know if any of these three contain the cursed, which refers to Lillian Renashi. She's like a special case now, using one of the same words. Guys, are you trying to make this confusing? I don't understand why you can't just pick a fucking word for one particular class of being and stick with that word the whole time, instead of doing all this juggling and stuff. And it gets worse later on. But one thing that does also get worse is the fact that they misspelled the word hiding. Holy shit. Oh, and by the way, did you even notice there were dogs there? I read this thing 2 times and did not notice the dogs because the dogs blend in just fine with the ground and the gravestones and the dark coats and everything else. And by the way, if you haven't read ISOM number 2, you don't know whether those dogs are friend or foe either. A little bit of description there would help. I will say this, though, the fact that they put a editor's box saying that you should look at ISOM number 2 for the first appearance of Bloodruth is useful. I'm glad they did that. You should be putting stuff like that in your books because that sells other books. So now we have a battle scene where she gets her arms pinned by a couple of vampires, and one of the Hellions says, "Never," as in we will never reveal the whereabouts of the person you are looking for. "You will be dead, and that is when he will use his black magics to make you his bride." She says, "Disgusting. Our blood attracts the damned." And then she just has a look for some reason, and then she says, "That makes sense because I would have to be dead to allow that to happen." Okay, so this is a little bit too busy. Let's get rid of the disgusting there because we can pick up the disgust from what she says in the second panel. Let's also get rid of this completely unnecessary insert panel, and we are going to be seeing a bunch of these throughout the book. You don't need to put an insert panel in things. Feel free to leave the space blank, or better yet, just reposition your art so that it takes up the whole frame. This just slows the book down. You don't want the book slowed down. Although it would probably help a little if you slowed down enough to tell us where the hell these stakes came from, because she was not holding any in the previous panel. I like to have a little bit of continuity. I mean, not only is she breaking free of these guys' hold, where I think they're probably stronger than her, but she's also suddenly manifested wooden stakes out of nowhere. I don't even want to know where she pulled that out of. And then we have totally banal dialogue where it says, "Last chance before you find out why my family has the name Bloodruth." Yeah, Bloodruth doesn't fucking mean anything. It's just a name. That's just what your family is named. That's why they have the name Bloodruth, is because that's just their fucking name. It's not like my name where I think it means bread in Polish. It would make sense for me to say, "Ha, when you see these loaves that I bake for you, then you will know why my family has the name Partika." Because it actually means something. Bloodruth doesn't mean anything. Why would you even say that? Okay, so she gets overwhelmed, and her dogs take on one of the vampires. She says, "Good boys," and then she says, "Bingo, holy ground. Do you not scout the land before you go to a cemetery just to see whether or not you have any opportunities to get away? Especially if you know you're going to be in some sort of conflict? I mean, what the hell are you just realizing this for? Oh, and by the way, you see that insert panel of Jesus on the side? Get fuck rid of that. There's no reason for that panel to be there. Okay, now here is a sequence that I thought was absolutely beautiful in the book because it all occurs on the same page. But upon further reflection, I realized that it makes no damn sense because what you've got here is Bloodruth leaping over the heads of these blood homunculi, and she leaps through a window and somehow leaps through a window coming outside, because that all looks like the night sky to me. That does not look like she's inside the church, and yet when you go to the third panel on the page, she's actually falling inside the church. And again, this is a lovely scene. It's just that without there being any interior brick here, it doesn't look like she's actually going inside the church. It looks like she went through one window and maybe went through another and came out on the other side of the church, which would have been counterproductive. I don't know. That's stuff you gotta watch for. You gotta understand where your characters are in space and time. You cannot just settle down like Rob Liefeld and think, if I just draw foreground and forget about the background, it doesn't matter. matter. Now, once all of the enemies are gone, it's sunrise, and she decides, I need to get the fluorospark. I need answers, which leads me to ask, what the hell were you fucking around in a cemetery for with all those vampires if where you really needed to be was fluorospark? Can you please have some kind of linear sense made out of this story that I can grab onto? Because right now I just see a whole lot of random hodgepodge going on. Now, this page I wanted to point out for the art fail at the top, because you would think that Bloodruth Manor would be presented in larger form. I feel like this was like a lazy decision on the part of the artist to basically say, I don't want to have to draw a great big house in a lot of detail, so I'm just going to shrink down this panel to the smallest thing I can possibly do to avoid any complex art. That's what it feels like to me, and moreover, I don't even understand why this has to be its separate insert to begin with. Why the hell wouldn't you just make this into one big panel if you're going to have the house be so small? You'd actually give the house some room to grow and breathe and, be something impressive to the reader if you made this the first panel and just made it one big giant panel. Here's another great case of an unnecessary panel slowing down the book. You've got her father, who is apparently a convalescent. He's sitting facing the window, and we can see him through the window. We have no reason to see him through the window. And then she walks in and says, Father, may I come in? Get the fuck rid of this panel. There's no reason for it to be there. Why do we have this necessity to put in panels that do nothing but slow the book down? Now she flies off after an unproductive conversation with her father and says, Fluorospark better be ready for me. Although, to me, when I first read it, it was like, Fluorospark. Because that's a big stylized B. You're telling me I'm not supposed to read that? And for fuck's sake, you've got how many artists working for you? Can you not come up with an actual logo for Bloodruth? Even if it's something like a pool of blood or something, or some other crest or sigil. Because this is going to pop up in various other places, and I'm going to be like, I'm thinking it's the first letter of the word that's coming next. So, Fluorospark. And then she says, this is the only way to travel, above the clouds, under the cover of night, away from prying eyes. And I know this is a nitpick, but you can't breathe above the clouds, okay? If she doesn't have some magical source of oxygen with her, she's going to pass out and die. She's going to fall off the back of the damn dragon or asphyxiate. Okay, so she goes out to the middle. She takes her dragon. She takes her dogs. She's out in the middle of the Fluorospark Desert. I guess this is Shadow Valley, maybe. I don't know. Doesn't really say. It just says it's a big open area. And she draws a blood circle on the ground and she says, show me where the evil is. And then we get this look at the city. And I don't know what I'm looking at, obviously, because she hasn't said, oh, look at all that aura of evil that surrounds the city. For all I know, that's just normal freaking Fluorospark, and there's like an Aurora Borealis for some freaking reason. You gotta explain what the hell's going on to at least some degree, especially on this next sequence of panels where we see her just kind of look off to the side and say, I see you. What are you? And honestly, I had to pay pretty close attention to notice that she's looking at what looks like the outline of a figure. But I don't know who this figure is. And I don't know if we ever know who this figure is. And the reason being is that before anybody's able to make an appearance or before this figure uncloaks or anything, we get this ball that looks like it hits her hand because of the way that it's drawn. It actually doesn't. It just comes inside the circle. And it's a little technological ball that's just rolling along the ground. I didn't know it was rolling along the ground. I thought maybe it flew into her hand because her hand obviously isn't on the ground. So she bats it away. Somebody says, hey, that's not very nice. And then she says, what? Who goes there? Reveal yourself this instant or else. And it's gooding. So in another kind of marketing ploy or something, and we'll see another one of those coming up, and he picks up the ball, and he hits the ball, and he says, I finally caught up with you. You're a Bloodruth. I've been looking all over for you. It looks like it's my lucky night. And then he sets the ball down, which is just a complete letdown, unless he's trying to attack her again, which would make some sort of sense, if he attacked her in the first place, because I don't really know. You may as well just get rid of this panel altogether. What I also don't know is whether or not he was the person who was cloaked in some way, because he doesn't fade in. We don't see him fading in from a state of invisibility. All right, so she attacks him with, I don't know how much blood. Is that supposed to be blood or is that something else? It's swishing as though it's not blood. It looks like it's hot. I don't know what the hell that is. Is that supposed to be energy or is that supposed to be blood? Is it supposed to be blood infused with energy? You do know this is Bloodruth #1, right? I mean, she could be explaining some of this shit to us. And especially in these two panels where you don't say a fucking thing. Like, what? Why are these two panels even there if you're not going to do anything with them? So now she's floating in the air, being propelled up by I don't know how much blood. I mean, for heaven's sakes, how is she not drained by now? Assuming that's even blood. Oh, and by the way, your moon's too fucking big. Quit with the Todd McFarlane bullshit. Actually know what the size of the moon is supposed to be at any given point. So here is where Gooding defends himself, saying, if you just take a moment before you keep attacking me, I'm a friend of Dominic's. I sent word weeks ago and never heard back. And somehow her dogs are there. Because why? Are we just supposed to know there's some sort of telepathic connection between them? Because otherwise, why are they there? She didn't summon them. So she continues, my father is away on business. Who are you? Gooding, we cover a variety of services for those who feel they need extra support in these uncertain times. We've got an otherworldly doozy on our hands. And then she says, we? And he says, we, obviously meaning all of his robot army thing. He doesn't mention his wife, by the way, who I thought was going to be part of his story, except I have no idea whether or not she's still alive. Mike Barron's Gooding the Polymath story does not really connect the dots between the end of Gooding the Polymath and ISOM number 2, so I'm kind of wondering what the hell happened to his wife. Did she die at some point, and now he feels more connected to machines than he does to actual people? Because if you look at Gooding the Polymath, Gooding is one of the most well-adjusted people you will ever see in a comic book, and in this, he's just kind of off. And that's one of the things that I do have to give the Soska sisters credit for, is that I do believe that they actually try to adhere to Eric July's characters, as opposed to come up with just their own spins. I mean, Mike Barron, Chuck Dixon, they just basically took the basic templates for Brian Solari and Alpha Core, or Gooding in Mike Barron's case. They just ran with it and didn't pay any goddamn attention to anything that had come before. And the Soskas are actually making the effort. So I have to give them credit for that. I mean, even back in Yaira number 1, they were trying to make Brian Solari and Ingrid Valdez sound like they sounded in ISOM number 2. God only knows what the Great War of Separation is going to be like since Chuck Dixon's writing that one. Okay, so all of these robots are included in his we, and you can tell there's kind of supposed to be a parallel here between the robot dogs that come out and the 2 dogs that are here, except that the 2 dogs are seated. I mean, come on. Don't you think there should be a little bit of tension here? You got a bunch of robot dogs that just blitz up, and the dogs are just sitting there like, no big. At this point, I understand why she's looking at us, breaking the fourth wall, as if to say, yeah, you are reading a fuck stupid book. So now she goes into explaining why it is that she is here out in the desert. She says, well, we came here because the screams of the damned begged us to save this land from the evil that approaches. Something very wicked approaches Florispark, and there's something very bad already here. The screams of the damned begged us to save this land? I thought the damned were the enemy. Are they the good guys? And so what is the wicked thing that's coming if it's not the damned? And what is the very bad thing that's already there? I mean, if there's kind of an inkling of that later on, but God, can you just keep one story straight? And then she points off at a castle in the distance. That castle, I'll start there. Why didn't you fucking start there before you even drew the blood circle on the ground? Didn't you kind of think, hey, there's a castle over there. Maybe instead of drawing a fucking blood circle on the ground, I should start over there. Holy fucking shit. What is it that passes for storytelling here? So Gooding has a job to do, and that job has to do with the owners of that castle, who happen to be, drumroll please, yep, it's Michael Copper and Lillian Renashi, who are basically complaining that they bought that place, and there happens to be somebody inconvenient living in there. Not illegal aliens, unless maybe it's Hellians, in which case it would be illegal aliens, wouldn't it? So anyway, Michael Copper and Lillian Renashi, they're pissed. They want Sydnee Bloodruth to help and clean out that area of whoever's dwelling in the castle so that they can move in. And Michael Copper actually says, listen, name your own price. Anything we own will offer us payment. We need this job to be done. And Sydnee Bloodruth hops on that offer like it was Bitcoin from 2 years ago, saying, I take care of your problem and I can name my price within your means. Sign here, not in blood, necessarily. Because holy fuck, is that a stupid deal? What kind of moron is this guy? I mean, even Lillian Renashi complains to him saying, oh, I'm sure the deal looks good to me too, Michael. That contract better have been fairer than Snow White. It's like, do you think maybe you should have spoken up before he fucking signed behind the thing? You worthless tramp? Holy shit. These characters are so fuck stupid. I mean, I already know where this is going because or at least I think I do, because Bloodruth lives in that goddamn castle in ISOM number 2. I bet she asks for the castle when they're all done. Holy fuck. So, Bloodruth, she doesn't really trust the two of them, so she looks into Michael Copper's soul, apparently, and sees him beating up a guy for money, which seems kind of consistent with the fact that he's going to be coming out with his own book called The Black Eye Club. Then she looks at Lillian Renashi, and Lillian is just looking right back at her, so that's actually kind of a nice chilling thing. I like that. What I don't like is the completely useless panel right there. I mean, seriously, this is all silent panels. We don't need a silent panel of Michael and Lillian there. It doesn't make any sense to have it. Why would they just be standing there not saying anything? Last but not least, before Bloodruth and Gooding go off to storm the castle, Bloodruth just decides to make a detour to a church to go pray, where she runs into Stefania Martinez from Yaira number 1, and basically Stefania tells her to go to hell, and nothing else happens. So, other than, Bloodruth calls her Bacharming. Yeah, Bacharming. Maybe that's a combination of bitch and charming. They don't even put in a blurb here that says, for further adventures of Stefania, go to Yaira number 1. Because that would actually fucking make sense if you were trying to sell another book by including this character in there. But if all you're doing is including Miss Half-Shaved Head in here just because you like the idea of them two having met before, it's gratuitous bullshit that fills a page or two and accomplishes nothing. So unless she comes back later in the book, who knows, she might. This was a wasted couple of pages, and I have no idea what the hell they were thinking. So, the Saska sisters. Yep, they're turning out garbage again, but I will say this. I will give them this one piece of credit. Like I said before, they are doing their best to adhere to the characterizations of these characters, not only Bloodruth, but also Gooding, and they did so in Yaira number 1 concerning Brian Solari and Ingrid Valdez. They are trying very hard to stick with Eric July's vision for the characters, and so I do have to give them props for that. Michael Montanot, really talented guy. I mean, I like the art in this book. I just don't like some of the things he does with his art. Usually it's when he puts in an insert panel that just slows the book down. And really, he needs to understand when one of those panels is necessary and when one of those is not necessary. I mean, just showing a panel where nothing is going on is a complete waste of the reader's time unless you are giving the reader some sort of valuable information through captions or something else. And honestly, I don't know. Maybe the problem is also with the letterer who bears responsibility for filling in the words and such. Why is it that the letterer is leaving so many panels blank intentionally? I mean, is it just because the letterer is following the script and doesn't know how to, determine when the writer doesn't really understand what the artist delivered and has to be creative enough to not break the flow of the story, but make the story flow better by where the lettering placement is. Kind of like when I was talking way back about the scenes from Alpha Core, when there would have been better scenes if some dialogue had been moved from one panel to another. It seemed obvious to me, but it doesn't seem obvious to everyone else, obviously. So, that was Bloodruth number 1, the first 25 pages. When I have read further in the book and I have enough information to come out with another video, I definitely will. And hopefully the book gets better from here, because right now I just feel like it is a spaghettified mess of woven plot threads, mystery upon mystery. None of them are satisfying. None of them are actually revealed. And we've got a cavalcade of Rippaverse characters pouring through this book. There's no reason Stefania Martinez needed to be in this book. I'm not even certain that Gooding needed to be there, although I kind of understand them wanting to kind of raise his profile. Michael Copper and Lillian Renashi, of course, those are selling their individual books. They're coming out later. It's probably more of a marketing thing than a character thing. We'll see. We'll see how this massive spaghetti unwinds itself. Other than that, I'm not looking forward to the next video. I'm not gonna lie. This is why I milk my audience for donations on comics like these, because I cannot say that I actually want to read this stuff. I need my audience to really, take the burden of that. Speaking of which, Pigman, number 1. Poll results are in by a slight margin. I would say it probably came out to about 60-40. You do want to see reviews of Pigman number 1. So I am asking $20 from my audience. You can click on the thanks link that's underneath this video to make your donation, or wait for my next live stream. I'll probably do it in the near future. Pigman number 1 from Bosch Fawston. It's about an anti-jihadi superhero and the twin brothers who react very, very differently to 9/11. One rejecting his Muslim faith entirely, and the other getting more and more involved in it. So how does the Pigman comic come between them? It will be an interesting thing to see. It all depends on y'all, so $20 is what I'm asking for a review of Pigman number 1. Thanks to everyone who stuck around with this video. I'm Mike Partika. Thanks again, and I will talk to you later.